I want to talk about the car again and the crime scene. So, the 1969 green Ford Maverick was reported at 10 o'clock to police, a block from the Carriage House Apartments, as being illegally parked. Now, at that time, the people at the police department didn't tie that into the nun being missing or murdered, or that was her car. So it was a contemporaneous report that came in, but then later on they tied it together so that they were able to narrow down the timeline about where the car was at what time. You know, that witnesses saw it. She left at 7:30, and then people saw the car whirl back in about, 8-ish, and then there was a loud argument heard by two different people. So we're thinking that between 8:05, 8:30 is maybe when she was carjacked, and then by 10 it was back at the place, but not in its original normal parking spot. It was off a block away. It was at an odd angle. It had its tail into the street, and someone called it into the police. The car was unlocked. The keys are in the ignition, and that was not Sister Kathy's habit to leave the car unlocked. The car had muddy tires and mud in the wheel wells. There were twigs and leaves in the front seat. There was a broken umbrella and a cigarette butt in the back seat. And the trash receptacle, which I do believe was between the two front seats, was knocked over. The Muley's dinner rolls were in the footwell of the passenger seat. A strange item, which was a long piece of dry grass with perhaps a piece of string from her slip or from her yellow sweater, was tied to the gear shift steering column. Allegedly, the cigarette butt that was found in the back seat of the car contained DNA that was later found. And allegedly there was no blood in the car at all, and the only fingerprints were those of Sister Kathy and Sister Helen Russell Phillips. And initially the cops said that there was no forensic evidence in the car, and maybe at that time there wasn't because they didn't have the ability to get the DNA off the cigarette butt at that time, but then later on they could. So at that time they had said there was no forensic evidence in the car. So Sister Helen Russell said whoever put that car there wanted it to be found, and I agree 100%. Either way you look at it, if someone carjacked her and wanted to put some pressure on her about the SA that she was telling about, the higher ups, maybe she had plans to run it up the chain. Maybe she tried to run it up the chain a little bit and it got back to Maskell because that person didn't do anything about it. You got to think of who's her superior. And then maybe she was going to run it further up the chain or take it to the police. Who knows? And maybe they wanted to have a chat with her and they strong-armed her into her car, pushed her into the passenger seat, thereby knocking over the trash can, took her off to an area near where she was found. Not quite where she was found, because where she was found you couldn't drive the car. But off into an area like that nearby, there was lots of wooded areas, and killed her. Maybe by accident, maybe on purpose. But the car was towed when it was found, and it was processed after towing. It was not processed on the scene. So that could also account for the Muley's dinner rolls being in the footwell as opposed to being on the passenger seat if they were actually on the passenger seat. Now, if they were on the passenger seat, that would make you think that there wasn't somebody in the passenger seat. And you following me? That maybe the idea of a carjacking where you push somebody into the passenger seat and you drive off, you're not going to have Muley's rolls sitting there in the passenger seat. I think the Muley's rolls prove that Kathy never made it up to her apartment with the rolls in hand. You just went to cash a paycheck, and to get the hot Muley's dinner rolls, fresh baked, Baltimore's favorite, and you take them back up to the apartment. You leave them there. You wouldn't put them back in your car. So she never made it up to the apartment. Whatever happened to her probably happened outside in her parking spot. And so Kathy was being treated as a missing person at this time. And after they processed the car, they gave it back to Sister Helen Russell Phillips because she needed a car to drive, and she was the part owner of the car. So now let's go on to the crime scene. 2 months pass, and Kathy's body is discovered on January 3rd, 1970. a hunter named George Eugene Brown and his stepson Carl Michael Berkheimer found the body at a dump in Lansdowne. Remember I said, remember Lansdowne? Lansdowne. What's near Lansdowne? St. Clement. So this area is not private property at that time. For the hunters, this area wasn't far from their home near the Holland's Ferry side of Monumental Avenue. It had a distillery and it had a mattress factory nearby. And there was also one house nearby. So out there, they're busy hunting for squirrels and rabbit with their German Shepherds. So that's what they're doing in this kind of a rural-ish, dumpy area. So looking for small game. The body was found 20 yards off the 2100 block of Monumental Avenue on a snow-covered embankment. And if you look at the pictures, the way she's placed, you wouldn't have seen it, say, from the street. And the hunter's son spotted Sister Kathy and exclaimed, it looked like a big old doll down there. Like, come, Dad, it looks like a big old doll down there, to his stepdad. And the hunter, when he looked at it, he was unsure if the body was male or female because the elements, it was snowing, okay? It was thick snow. The elements and the animals had already been at the body, mutilating the soft tissue orifices. So, makes it hard to tell. They went together to a nearby house to call the police. I don't know if the police ever went to that nearby house, how nearby the house was, and whether they ever went to that house to say, hey, did you see anybody on the 7th, 2 months ago, loitering around here? Because they would have had to carry or drag Sister Kathy's body up to where it was found. So it'd be interesting if anyone contacted the people that lived in that house. So they call the police. The body is frozen to the ground, and the funeral director had to use a hammer and a chisel to extricate the body from the snow and the ice. People like to talk, oh, she was dumped there, da 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 da. Yeah, she might have been dumped there after she was murdered at one place, but they weren't, I don't think, in my opinion, they were moving her around a whole bunch because the body was encased in that snow and ice. Just FYI. Later on in the news, the hunter discovered the name of the body they had discovered. So he saw the news, and it was Sister Catherine Cesnik. And so that was how he found out that it was female and who it was. She was found 5 miles from the shopping center nearby where she was shopping. You remember she went to the bank? Then she went to the Muleys. It was across the street from the Edmondson Village. So that's 5 miles from where her body was found, but it was only like 1 mile from St. Clement, give or take. And also note, a car could not have driven up to where Kathy's body was found. And a Baltimore County police official said, whoever dumped the nun's body there had to know the area well. That dump was difficult to get to if you didn't know your way around, and the nun didn't vanish until well after dark. So think about that. The person who did this not only knew probably where Sister Kathy lived, carjacked her, put her in the car, knocked her over, drove her to an area like this in the dark and put her there in the dark or wherever she was put, because people think she might have been moved once because there wasn't blood in the car and there really wasn't a lot of blood or any blood at the crime scene. So think about that. But then we're going to get into the autopsy. All right? On the scene, Kathy was left on her back. She was wearing only one black glove on her left hand. Her purse was there on the scene with a prescription bottle inside. Had her name on it. The money, the $250, give or take what the Muleys rolls would have cost, that was missing. So if you want to talk about robbery or whatever, that was the only money that was missing. That was because there was a blue raincoat. The body was clothed. However, the clothes were so disarranged as to imply a sexual assault. And this is according to Werner Spitz. She was wearing a watch, a St. Augustine ring, and a wedding band that Koob had given to her, inscribed in Greek with agape is the unconditional love. So again, those who want to say that there wasn't more to this, why was she still wearing the essentially like the wedding ring that Koob gave her. I don't know. But then agape is the unconditional love. Maybe it was just a friendship ring? I don't know. So Kathy was wearing a full slip, which had been pulled up over her breasts. The navy skirt was hiked up. So this disarrangement of the clothes made Spitz lean towards the fact it was could have been a sexual motivated assault. But you couldn't tell because the animals had already done what they did. Note, Lieutenant at that time, James Scannell, the police officer that's in the Keepers, was the first officer at the scene at Halethorpe. So he was the first officer responding to the scene of Sister Kathy's body discovery. And later, after all this stuff comes out, strangely enough, some of these SA victims come forward and say not only was Maskell abusing them, so was this Scannell. They saw him on the Keepers and went, oh my gosh, that's the police officer. Now, that's what they said. I'm reporting it. Allegedly is what they said, so make it that what you will. Scannell vouched many times in newspaper articles about Maskell's being seemingly a good person, and also allegedly told people in interviews he didn't believe the victims. And so make of that what you will. Could be because he was also involved. It could be just because he was hoodwinked. Again, make of that what you will. The autopsy done by Dr. Werner Spitz, who was Deputy Chief Medical Examiner at that time, revealed that Kathy died from blunt force trauma to the left side of her head, which left a round hole which would be made with a ball peen hammer, a brick, or a billy club. Her skirt had been pulled up, the shirt was in disarray, the genital region had been consumed by animals. Dr. Spitz believed that it was a sexually motivated murder. I said this, sorry. He explained that the wound was a skull fracture with the skull fracturing on impact, and that the outer skin was elastic and not broken, and that the skin had to be removed to fully reveal the injury. And what that tells me is there probably wasn't a lot of blood. Do you remember the John Benet Ramsey case where she had this humongous skull fracture across her head and there wasn't a lot of blood? Or almost any blood at all? That is the break is different, okay? But the concept's the same. Where you have a skull fracture, but the elasticity of the skin bounced back in, and though you did make a hole in the skull, I don't think that the skin was broken. I think that's what he was trying to say, that there was still, that he had to remove everything in order to really get a good grasp of the true injury. Now, if you had had a wound that was immediately open to the elements, like upon you doing it, then that's also where the little creatures would immediately go to. So the fact that that wasn't the case makes me think that maybe there wasn't a lot of blood. And in addition to blunt force trauma, she additionally had strangulation wounds. The hyoid bone was broken, as well as damage to the thyroid. So strangling is usually a personal crime. Not always, but it mostly is a personal crime. You're getting up close and personal, face to face with the person you're strangling. So usually it's a crime of passion. That's usually not done by someone who doesn't know you. So again, that's probably what led police to believe that, hey, this is a personal crime. This is a crime of passion. Then they're finding these letters with Koob, and that's where their mind went to. Koob is a suspect. I just want to note that later in 1994, police did obtain more DNA. We'll see. They've been trying to match it against different people. I think they put it in CODIS and it hasn't matched anybody yet, so they're still looking. But I just want to say one thing. When the police allegedly went to interview Koob multiple times, allegedly the Archdiocese intervened on behalf of Koob to be like, hey, arrest him or let him go. But Koob strenuously denies this, said that he didn't contact anyone from the Archdiocese. He was a Jesuit. What would they care? That he didn't ever call them, and so he didn't know why they would show up on his behalf if that was the case. And that's what made me think is maybe the Archdiocese, if it's true that they did interfere in this case and say, get involved in shutting things down, maybe it was for Maskell. Maybe it really wasn't for Koob. Maybe that, when they were also questioning Maskell, maybe they just decided they would just try to shut it down. I mean, that's just my opinion, because enough of the investigators who have retired and deep throats have come out and said, the archdiocese shut this down. They shut it down. They got involved. They shut it down. Well, why? Who are you protecting? A priest, obviously, right? So which one? The murder of Sister Kathy goes unsolved. It goes cold. And it goes cold for a couple decades. Then it gets rejuvenated whenever the outcry and the lawsuits start up and people start looking back into things, and then it'll go cold again. And then, the keepers will come out and they'll look into things and they'll try to dig up DNA and compare it to other stuff. So we don't know if this will ever be solved, but I wanted to talk about the lawsuit. And eventually talk about the similar murders in the area with possible ties to Maskell, because there's always a chance, having said all the stuff I said, that perhaps Kathy was killed by a serial killer, because there were other similar murders in the area with possible ties to Maskell, or just someone who was, killing women. There was, in October 1970, Pamela Lynn Conyers, who was 16 years old, from Anne Arundel County, was killed. September 1971, Grace Elizabeth Montagna, who was 16, was killed. 1975, Frances Danny Crocetti, or Crocetti, I'm not sure, 14 years old, was killed. And September 1981, Heather Porter, of 13 years old, of Towson, was killed. And these all either had a tie somehow tangentially to Maskell or the church he was at or something, okay? So as far as I know, could be wrong, these all have loose ties, like either he was their pastor, or they went to his church, or he lived right near them, or something, so there's some things to look into that were very similar. So let's talk about that 1994 lawsuit and what led up to it. And people talk about, what did they have? What reasons did the Jane Does have? They had, 40 million reasons to come against the church. Can we talk about the fact that Jane Doe had tried in 1992, 2 years before, to go through mediated settlements with the church? I mean, can we talk about that? Or are we just going to make it like these are just greedy victims? That makes no sense. Because things end up being uncovered the minute Jean got a non-church attorney who did their job. This is in my opinion. Because all the mediation, before she got a counsel that wasn't a church paid for official counsel, done between Jean and the church lawyers, none of that revealed any supporting witnesses, anything to Maskell's abuse. But the minute she gets an attorney that's not associated with the church, all of a sudden, things get done, things get uncovered. In my opinion, had the church done the minimal amount of investigation, looked through their own freaking files, had they not been shredded, in my opinion, or whatever, they would have uncovered the abuse dealing with Maskell. And they could have settled with the victims, and it would have never seen the light of day. But since they required Jean to have another witness to believe her in 92, then we end up where we are. It's almost like you created this. You created all of this. When Franz was first messed with, they'd gotten rid of Maskell completely, we wouldn't be here. Causation. But the problem with the case that was filed in 1994 is it's gonna fail on the statute of limitations. And the concept of a statute of limitations is to make it so both parties have rights, and the defendant has a right to be able to gather something to defend themselves, to gather their memories, to gather their facts, to gather witnesses. And if you let the statutes go so long, you could say, Thielen, you did something on this date, in 1994. I'm not going to remember what I was doing in 1994 to even defend myself. I mean, most people shred their records, even their tax records, after 7 years. So that's one reason you have a statute of limitations, so you can defend yourself. What if your alibi from 20 years ago is now dead? Then then you don't have defense. So that there's a reason there's a statute of limitations, okay? But having said all that, it's a problem with the statute of limitations that it runs out so quickly for CSA, child abuse. In Maryland, at that time, the law gave the victims of CSA until the age of 25 to report the abuse. The statute of limitations ended up being extended to the age of 38, which is good. That's a good start. So the plaintiffs here, Jane Doe and Jane Roe, were trying to get around that old statute of limitations. And there's only a couple ways you can get around it. And recovered memories is one of them. All right. Now, if the statute of limitations hadn't had that exception, I don't think they ever would have gone that route. They just would have full bore gone down through the road of this is what they did to me. And there wouldn't have been a statute of limitation on it. But since there's these exceptions, you have to try to get around the statute of limitations. You following me? So then they come, and if you say, oh, I had a repressed memory, then the other side will come back and say, well, that's not valid, and the science says this, that, and the third. So that's how we get into this craziness. The statute of limitations was extended to the age of 38. So if something happened to you when you were under the age of majority, you have the age of 38 to bring forth your claims, and it won't be time barred, where the court's just like, hey, you saying this happened this date, it's time barred. So it just gets tossed out. So the plaintiffs were trying to get around that old statute of limitations rule, and also saying, victims don't come forward in these kind of CSA cases until they're older, and that is scientifically proven. Most victims, valid victims of CSA, do not come forward until their 30s, their 40s, their 50s. It's just a statistical fact. They were trying to get around this by going under that, hey, I've recovered some of these memories. But truly, in my opinion, only one of the victims were truly recovering a repressed memory, and that was Jane Doe. Because Jane Roe pretty much remembered everything, okay? There was a few things that were coming to light for her, just like anything. If you were to stop and really meditate on something and really think about something that happened, you would think of more things, and you could say, oh, now it's come to me. It was repressed, now it's recovered. But there's a whole debate about that. And so what happens was the defendants, because they're trying to use an exception to the rule, bring in the expert witness, Dr. Paul R. McHugh, MD. Oh gosh, you guys, this guy, he was the director of psychology from Hopkins from 1975 to 2001. And this is the doctor that supports the False Memory Foundation. Now, this is a whole other topic, because this foundation is a group that debunks the theories that are based upon the concept that trauma can be repressed. They're saying no, that it doesn't. And they liken this kind of stuff to the Salem witch trials. Let me see. Oh, I've got a quote directly from Dr. Paul McHugh in general as an expert witness. I cannot deny child abuse occurs, but usually victims over the age of 5 remember such an experience and do not appear before psychiatrists with sudden discovery in adulthood. So that was his concept. And a lot of the False Memory Foundation was also relying on the fact that the subjects were under hypnosis and that psychiatrists teased the information out of these people in this manner. This wasn't the case here, but they still used this fellow to debunk every single thing that the Roes and the Does said. It's a whole thing with the MKUltra with this fellow. That's my opinion, okay? There is, in my opinion, an MKUltra connection with this, and it's tenuous. But let me try to make it dumbed down, because you don't really want to go deep into this unless you want to get into the MKUltra concept. There's a False Memory Foundation that came out around the time that all these things were popping off about the MKUltra becoming public, which is now, it's a true thing. It really, truly happened. Go to the CIA's CREST website, look it all up, all right? The thing is some of the projects continued under sub-projects and the names were changed. This is not argued, all right? However, allegedly the MKUltra was stopped by the CIA. However, there was still some fallout from that, right? You had apologies from presidents over and over again about the MKUltra stuff that went on. And the problem is when you still have fallout with people that are still alive that went under, that underwent this, and you didn't tell them they did, and you haven't given them a payout, you're still covering it up. And in my opinion, this is just fully my opinion, the False Memory Foundation was a group that was almost a disinformation agent. And let me just try to dumb this down, and I could be wrong on any of this, and please correct me if I'm wrong. You have this group that was like a family called the Freyds or the Frieds. It's F-R-E-Y-D, and it's a family, all right? And this family had a personal psychiatrist for the family. Okay, right there, I just got to laugh. His name was Leif, a German, L-I-E-F. Leif, that's a German name, I mean. And he is this personal psychiatrist of this other German named family, right? And Leif was a colleague of Dr. Martin Orn. Now, this is an MKUltra doctor known backwards, forwards, no doubt. In my opinion, this is an MKUltra doctor. It's in the records. A colleague of an MKUltra doctor, all right, is this personal psychiatrist for this family. And this Leif guy is seeing the daughter of this family member as a client, and she accuses her father of abuse, right? This daughter later recants the abuse against her father and essentially says that the memories were false through therapy, that they were planted by this Leif, essentially. All right? Are you surprised? Now, mind you, her father admitted, allegedly, on social media, that the Office of Naval Research had been giving him money since 1988 or so. So this family is getting paid by the Office of Naval Research. If that doesn't make you stop and go, whoa, okay, you've got Martin Orn in a colleague with Leif. Leif is allegedly planting false memories, and this daughter who then accuses her father of abuse, and then they're turning around saying, no, it didn't. And now they're like using this whole family as an example of how false memories can be implanted. And so then she goes on and said, oh, no, that didn't happen. It was a false memory. And they did this whole campaign on this example of the false memory syndrome. It's disinformation. It's like, oh, my God, this just kills me dead. So anyway, in my opinion, the False Memory Foundation is a disinformation campaign. That's just my opinion. To counter the still lingering MKUltra operations that had gone on in the past, that still sprinkled into the 70s. Now, a lot of these folks, now it is proven, you can go on the CIA site and read on MKUltra, and it will say that they selected doctors to be in these programs due to their proclivity to do these sort of things. I don't know if somehow Maskell got involved through Irvin or through Richter or through someone. I have no idea, but I can tell you some of the techniques he was using were very MKUltra. A lot of the stuff, the drugging, the hypnosis, the trigger words, triggering your memories to remembering a door shut and repressing the memories, all of this is MKUltra. And then the icing on the cake is the fact that allegedly a source said the dig at the Holy Cross was nothing sinister. He said Maskell and a psychologist used a federal grant to set up a psychological testing center in 1975, and that Father Maskell took the records to Holy Cross with him in 1985. What the F is that? But MKUltra or some offshoot. I mean, what is that, guys? I don't know. Okay, now rant off. So let's talk about the piddly payoffs, shall we? The mediated settlements. That even some people who didn't sue in civil court but went through the church settlement process, what they got out of it. So for those of you who want to scream, oh, they had 40 million reasons to do this, to slander the church and Father Maskell and Dr. Richter and all this. Let me tell you how much money they got and what in exchange they had to sign to get the money. The Baltimore Archdiocese paid out $472,000 to Father Maskell's numerous victims. Let that sink in. Let that sink in. Do you think they pay out easily? That's a lot of money, okay? Do you think one person got that money? Many people got that money. And who knows at this point what that number is. This was an old accounting. Pushed by the 1993 to 1994 lawsuits by Jane Doe and Jane Roe, the diocese started a review board in 1993 consisting of lay people, retired circuit judges, some non-Catholic, the commissioner of the Baltimore Police, seriously, psychologists, etc. By 2002, they were required to have review boards. A board gets a packet of information on the cases that they review. They get to ask questions. The board consists of 12 people who are appointed by the Archbishop. They're appointed by the Archbishop. Many victims alleged that a detective was hired to dig up dirt on them regarding these cases. Would you like a detective digging up dirt on you? The plaintiffs, when they sued in court, like I said, their claims were time barred on the statute of limitations. So Jean as Jane Doe and Teresa Lancaster as Jane Roe, they sued in civil court. All the parties involved, the AOB, the SSND, Richter, and the payouts that ended up being given by the Archdiocese were paltry sums of money for the injuries. I mean, we're talking running between $20,000 to $50,000 a person, okay? And 2 years of counseling, all right? And who wants to go and be counseled by the same group that did these things to you? Now, granted, I think you could get a stipend of money if you wanted to take your money and get counseling elsewhere. The counseling stipend was allegedly between $5,000 and $10,000 for treatment, or 2 years. It was like a warranty, whichever you used up first. So you either used up your 2 years first or your 5 to 10. This is allegedly, but I mean, really. So accepting these paltry sums required the plaintiffs to give up any right to future compensation, even if the statute of limitations changed or new evidence was revealed. So let me paint the picture for you. Let's say that photos of Maskell doing horrible things to a victim, Polaroids are uncovered. And there's plain proof to your eyes that a victim that had signed one of these agreements is being abused by Maskell. They cannot sue. They've waived their right to sue by taking the money and signing the document. And if they change the statute of limitations, those victims that have taken this paltry sum and signed the documents, they can never sue the church or anything again. Is that not crazy? So let's go through some of the money that these greedy victims wanted, right? Be ashamed of yourself if you're one of those people that have said that kind of stuff. Jane Doe got $50,000. I mean, for this, she underwent 21 hours of depositions. And you think these depositions are sweet? They almost, they can sometimes re-traumatize a victim. Teresa Lancaster, $40,000. And this is not with taking the attorney's fees out yet, guys. She was called a liar in her deposition. Donna Von Den Bosch was given $40,000 and an additional $10,000 for counseling. I think Jean and Teresa also got a stipend for counseling. But there's other victims, but as far as I know, I don't think anyone got over $50,000 for sometimes years of being alleged. Well, if they're paying out, they're almost agreeing that it happened. Years of abuse at the hands of more than one person, guns being put to your head. I mean, that's not, and then being re-traumatized for it, even after the church, in my opinion, knows that this guy had done this before. and to like force you to relive all this stuff and then cross-question you on it and dig up stuff on you to make you look like a liar so they don't have to pay you this piddly $40,000? Are you kidding me? No wonder people don't come forward. At least not in this mediation. I wouldn't. $40,000? You can't even, and once you take the attorney's fees out, you can't even buy a card for that. Would that be worth it to you to have your reputation smeared? No. I would, I don't know. I think they wanted the satisfaction of having the church admit it, that they did it, in a way. So if you watch The Keepers and listen to some of the podcasts, the foul play podcasts, you'll notice something, that many of the people involved that investigated this do not believe the same people are responsible. And I found that fascinating. I don't think anybody else has talked about it. And I'm speaking for other people right now, so this is in my opinion of my takeaway. But my takeaway is that Tom Nugent, who I just adore, the writer, he thinks that either Coob's involved or knew who did it. So that's one person who thinks Coob was involved. Gemma Hoskins, and this is, again, I haven't read her book yet, but allegedly she thinks that Billy did it. And you'd be like, who's Billy? Billy was allegedly someone that lived in the Carriage House apartments near Kathy, and that might have been maybe like a hitman on behalf of Maskell. Hitman in the sense of like he had blackmail on him and got Billy to do it. So Gemma thinks a Billy did it, like essentially a hitman. Bob Erlinson, who is one of the earliest reporters on this, I don't know who he thinks did it, but I think he's got a different opinion on it too. Shane Waters, who does the Foul Play podcast, thinks that Edgar Davidson did it, which was yet another concept of the hitman. I mean, no one seems to agree on who they think did it, but a lot of them all agree that Father Maskell had some kind of tie into it. I think that some folks think that it was just a plain old serial killer that had nothing to do with knowing anything about the essay. It just so happened that broke open the hidden essay that was going on at the church, but that it had nothing, it just so happened to be a coincidence. So is that not fascinating that people don't have a consensus of opinion on who done it? So let's go over I have some random thoughts, and these aren't tied together at all. They're random thoughts, so I'm going to go out with some randoms. The cops, and the doctors, and the lawyers, and the kids' parents. Get my picture? They all went to confession. Good Catholics, they went to confession. What if Father Maskell was using everybody's confessionals in order to gather blackmail on them? And maybe that's part and parcel about why this was so well hushed up and covered up. I mean, he knew so many folks and had the ability to leverage things against people. And what if Father Maskell used different people's sins against them as blackmail? Just putting it out there. Now, if someone says, what do you think happened? Here's what I think happened. I think that over the summer, that Kathy knew for sure by the time Jean had outcried, that was a third person. She knew that Father Maskell was doing something. I think she probably went to her superior at some point and was trying to assess from the kids as she was at Western, when she talked to the kids back at Keogh, if things had changed. And I think that she then ran it further up the flagpole with somebody. I'm not sure who. And I think that's when she was confronted. And I think that she was either killed outright on purpose or it was an accident. Like they were trying to argue, they were arguing with her, and she probably said, nah, I'm telling, and they bopped her, okay? I don't think Maskell got his own hands dirty. I do think he probably was there. A lot of people said, oh, I don't think he was there. He wouldn't get his hands dirty at all. The thing is he got his hands dirty enough to go to the apartment on the 6th and come in with Magnus. He got his hands dirty enough to threaten everybody and their brother with a gun all the time and have guns on the altar. I don't think he was such a wuss that, he wouldn't be along to make sure the thing wasn't done right. I don't know. I think that it definitely had something to do with Father Maskell. And I think also then having Kathy dead, he probably thought that he had cut that off at some point, but he knew he still had victims. He knew he still had victims who could talk. So I think that wherever she was first placed, right fresh, the first 2 weeks or so, that he used that opportunity to show her body to the victims, some of the victims that he still felt that were wishy-washy, that might tell or might have told. And that's why you have now, other than Jean, many other people saying that they saw Sister Kathy before she was discovered in the woods. They were led to her body by them and said, keep your mouth shut. And more than one person's come out and said that now, but they said, well, it wasn't where she was found. Well, I think that's because what he did was he took that opportunity to use her body as a threat to any and all that he thought could have ratted him out, because he didn't know how far it had gotten around. And then what he did was he just had it moved. He had it moved, and then it sat there and froze to the ground, and that was it. And he obviously did a pretty good job scaring people, because guess what? He essentially got away with it. I think that that's what happened. I think he knew he had to cover his tracks. One thing that does give me pause is, why in the hell did he keep molesting kids after Kathy was dead? See, that makes no sense to me. If you have a problem and you've done something wrong and you do everything you can to hush it up and to hush the people up that know, then why in the world would you keep doing it? So that's the one thing that makes me think, well, maybe it was a serial killer. I don't know. I really, truly don't know. I think Maskell had something to do with it, but if not, it's just this wild coincidence that popped open the essay at the school. I want to know what the head nun, Sister Maurice, knew. That's what I want to know. You got a head nun. If you trust your superior, that's the first person you're going to tell. I want to know what she knew. What did the school nurse, Miss Stafford, know? Whenever you're not feeling good, the school nurse is usually pretty nice, and you go to her, and there was a health suite at that school, and Miss Stafford, Sister Judith, and Maskell allegedly would have weekly review of all the little girls that went in there and with their ailments or with problems. So allegedly, Miss Stafford, Sister Judith, who now, we've heard some things about, that she denied the claims of the girls, and Maskell would sit together and review the girls that needed help. Boy, he just never could stop. Could he, in my opinion? I want to know where the School Sisters of Notre Dame's records are regarding the firing of A. Joseph Maskell, because the School Sisters of Notre Dame, I think they operated Archbishop Keough and also the Catholic Community Middle School in South Baltimore, where a hella scandal erupted with Merzbacher. Now, you want to have your eyes bug out of your head, go read up on Merzbacher. Okay? And you want to know who has a tie-in with Merzbacher? Father Maskell. Father damn Maskell. Let me make it really easy to understand. Scandal went on at another Baltimore School Sisters of Notre Dame school, okay? Involving Merzbacher, one of the priests. All right? And one of the kids saw something. And in order to invalidate what this kid saw, they had Father Maskell do a psych eval. He's not a doctor. What does that tell you? Cover up. That's my opinion. Okay. What was Sister Judith's involvement? What was her knowledge? She allegedly told Kathy's sister Marilyn, who's in the Keepers, okay? She allegedly, this is allegations, she allegedly told Catherine's sister that she was the one that told Sister Kathy about the kids being abused. So now she's the hero. She's the one that told Sister Kathy? Maybe it was what she told Sister Kathy after all the victims came and told you, and you said, no, it's not happening, I don't believe you? What's the truth here? What is the truth? Maybe it was. Maybe she didn't believe him, and then eventually she did, and she told Sister Kathy. Who the hell knows? Who the hell knows anymore? This is the craziest thing. I also want to address, as a side note, how abuse at the hands of a priest can cause a crisis of faith. I think in the Bible, and I don't know chapter and verse, that is like one of the worst things you can do, is to lead a child away from God. Like, they're the innocents, and leading them away from God is like one of the worst things you can do. Because there are people that have said, some of these victims wanted it and accepted it, and they thought they had a relationship with Father Maskell, and therefore that made it okay. That burns my buns so bad, because number one, they're underage. There is no consent when someone's underage. Duh. 2, you're in a position of authority over that person. You're their priest, okay? You're like their, even if you're just their regular teacher, you're their Boy Scout leader. That is absolutely unacceptable. Never acceptable. Doctor, any kind of position like that, that's unacceptable. So there's a two strikes against those people that think that. The third strike is he's their intercessor to God, and the kind of stuff that he was doing to make them right with God that he would do to them would turn a normal person against God. That is so sickening to me that someone would say that these victims were complicit in what he did. I can't with that. So if you ever think of putting that in my comment section, that's something, erase. It's going to be gone. I'm sorry. I will allow debate. I will allow corrections. I will allow different opinions, but that kind of crap ain't going to fly. So anyway, another thing to track down if you're interested in doing research on this, there's a Father John Carney, and he resided at St. Clement, Lansdowne in 1972. And John Joseph Carney, the third is his name. He died on October 30th, 2020 at Stella Maris Nursing and Assisted Living, the same place that Father Maskell also passed. I'm sure it was a nice place to pass, you know what I mean? Like, you've done all this stuff in your life, and then you get to live out even your final moments protected and in the bosom of a church facility. In 1995, Father Carney admitted to sexual allegations that had occurred in the 1970s. I just want to make mention of that because a lot of these victims have said, oh, there's other priests that were involved, but they didn't know them because they obviously weren't from their parish or from their area. This guy was operating in Lansdowne in 72, and guess who his roommate was, or one of his roommates was? Father Maskell. Guys, it never ends. It never ends. And I am not against the Catholic Church. I'm not against any religion, But this has got to be said. It's got to be stopped. And I think the best way for things to be stopped is to admit you did something wrong and to change it and not to cover it up. And that's just my opinion. So, I hope you found this interesting. I hope you found this enlightening. I hope you have an opinion that you want to share. If you've got any information, drop it in the comments below. If you have any corrections, drop it in the comments below. And I hope you have an excellent day. Thank you so much.